and welcome to Something to Talk About. I'm Linda McNamee, and as you read from our introduction, we will be learning a lot more about the National Braille Press, as well as resources for the visually impaired, which I can't wait to find out about. But before we begin, a few housekeeping rules that we need to set aside. I would like to thank John Vias for being the all-in-one encompassing crew for this evening. He's director, camera operator, graphics person, everything. So thank you, John, for hanging out at BCAT, well, actually, and keeping me in line as well. So John is a staff member here. So because we are still in COVID rules, we had to change a few little things. But I would also like to thank my husband, Paul, for staying home for Daddy Date Night. Hopefully the kids are behaving themselves and all is well for school night. If you would like, viewers at home, if you would like to give us a call this evening, you can always give us a call at 781-270-9199. Or if you have a question or question that you think of later on during one of the rebroadcasts or whenever, or if you have a question for a future topic or a suggestion for a future topic, you could always email me at talk@bcattv.org. So now I would like to introduce you to my wonderful guest for this evening, Joe Quintanilla. Did I say it right?
You did.
Yes! And you are the Vice President of Development and Major Gifts for the National Braille Press.
I am.
And that's really impressive.
Oh, thank you, Linda, and glad to be with you tonight, and thank you for inviting me to come and talk to you about National Braille Press.
Excellent. So before we actually get into tonight's discussion, I know we talked about this before we started recording, but can you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you kind of came to the Burlington area?
Sure. So I grew up in Cambridge, went to public school in Cambridge. I graduated from Cambridge Rich and Latin. I've been legally blind all my life. Okay. So I have a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which means that the retina, the rods and cones in my retina are deteriorating. So at one point, I did have a little bit more functional vision, but not enough to read regular print, not enough to really see well at night, not enough to ever drive or have an opportunity to drive. But grew up in Cambridge, great place to grow up. Then I went on to Boston College. I ran track and cross country in high school at Ringe, cool. And then at Boston College, I was fortunate enough to compete at the 1996 Atlanta Paralympics in the marathon. So I have a few marathon cool. Races under my belt. And fast forward 20 years later, my wife Gina and I were living in Medford. She's also blind, and as I say, she's a techie in the family, so she's very knowledgeable on all resources for blind people. And living in Greater Boston, and she works at Perkins at the Perkins Library in Watertown. I work at National Press in Boston and over by Northeastern. And when you start to look for apartments to rent and you see what the rents are, it's sort of the clincher. She's always wanted to have a home and own a home. And I was always like, well, I'm not sure that's always the best investment. But when we started to look for apartments and we saw what they were going for, it sort of sealed the deal for me of,
absolutely,
might as well pay a mortgage if you're going to pay that much.
Have something to show for it, after 20, 30 years.
Yeah, and so she's got, so we're both blind, and we're looking for a single-family home that was a ranch, one level.
Okay. And
Burlington, particularly this Skilton Lane, Cresthaven area, Foxwood Hill area, has a lot of single-family, one-level ranches. And perfect. That's how we came to know Burlington. Wasn't really familiar with it at all, and we've been here for about a year and a half now.
Oh, it's an awesome place to live. We will teach all the ropes.
Great.
So excellent. Well, thank you for joining me. So how did you find out or learn about National Press, and what made you end up working for them?
So when I was a kid, I'd get pulled out of class, resource room they called it, and I'd be learning different adaptive strategies on how
Okay.
to read, how to learn. So I was learning how to read Braille. I was also learning how to type in third grade because I
Wow.
couldn't, write. I couldn't see well enough to write by hand. So I was being taught all those things outside of the normal classroom. And one of the things that I made a mistake in, because I did have some functional vision and had magnification equipment, where I
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, I don't want to be pulled out of class. I don't want to be different.
Well, yeah, when you're 10 years old, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, so I kind of started to push away Braille and said, well, I can still, use magnification, use a CCTV where you put your printed document under a camera and it magnifies it on a 19-inch monitor. And
Okay.
I also had a pretty exceptional memory at the time. I can't say it's exceptional anymore the older I've gotten. But
Yeah, I don't think any of us could say that.
so I became pretty much an auditory learner, and I didn't really know National Braille Press when I was in school. So I came to know of National Braille Press when I was working in the blindness field for another organization, the Mass Association for the Blind, and we had put on some road races
Okay.
together to support the blind community, and I learned about National Braille Press through that. They were one of our partners
Okay.
for a race that we used to do called the Vision 5K, and that's when I started to really learn of the work that National Press did for kids particularly. And I kind of thought to myself, I wish I'd known about it when I was a kid because I would
Yeah.
have benefited from some of these fantastic programs. And as networking, is so important in any aspect of life.
Mm-hmm.
Through that relationship with the folks that I was working with from National Braille Press, they said, hey, we have an opening at National Braille Press. We think you'd be great to come and work here for us. And it was motivating for me to see the programs that we have for children, a program called Read Books, where we distribute over 1,000 book bags across the country to
Wow.
families that will help them learn how to use Braille, develop games and activities that they can play around with so that, reading is fun and it's interactive, and also literature for the parents on why they should advocate for Braille in their IEPs, individual
Okay.
education plan, and why literacy is important and that listening is not the same as reading. So all those things were really impressive to me, and as a fundraiser, part of my job is to tell the story and in a compelling way of the work that's done at the organization that I work for. And I got pretty passionate about this, and it's easy to fundraise for something you're passionate about, and knowing that I'd want kids to have a better experience than I did when it came to reading Braille, learning Braille, and not having a deficit by
Wow.
pushing it away.
Yeah, well, that right there, I mean, having lived it must really encourage, help out with your mission and your goals, both personally as well as professionally.
It does. One of the stories that I'll share with people is that in college I was a communications major, and one of my desires at the time was I wanted to be on radio,
Okay.
and I wanted to be an on-air talent personality. And one of the things that I was good at is, I could come up and develop scripts. I was a pretty good writer,
Cool.
but it was all memorization. And when I did a demo
Okay.
for wanting to be able to shop my voice around,
Mm-hmm.
um, I went on memorization. I had my sister read a script that I'd been given and onto audio cassette tapes, so dating back to the 90s. And I listened to it and memorized it, or thought I memorized it. But when I went to
Uh-oh.
the production house to do the demo, I kept moving words around. It sounded fine to me, but it wasn't what the script was. And the audio engineer
Oh,
said
okay.
to me, "Hey Joe, you're putting the in the wrong place in this sentence. Try to do it again." And I kept doing it. And they said, "Hey Joe,
You memorized it wrong. Oh
right.
no.
So
Oh
they said
no.
when they pay you to read a script, you got to read the script. So why don't we feed you the lines through the headset and have you repeat it?"
Okay.
And that was a mess. Trying
Oh,
to
yeah.
hear what someone's telling you and then instantly repeat it or say it in the way that's, with the right intonation,
Yeah.
and then be ready for the next line. So, needless to say, that demo got tossed somewhere.
Oh no.
And I really learned at that moment I was really not equipped to pursue an on-air career
Okay.
because I couldn't really read Braille fast enough or functionally enough. And I limited myself by pushing Braille away. Had I been able to
Okay.
read Braille, then I would be able to read what's on the script that any, or ads that any on-air personality would be reading. They'd be using their eyes and I'd be using my fingers.
Okay.
But that was sort of a big moment in my life where I said, wow, I made a mistake. And it's, certainly I'm happy with what I do for work now, but I certainly limited myself by not having as a Braille skill. So I try to convey that to people that we don't want blind children to be limited in their pursuits of careers or dreams because they didn't have access to the printed word or they didn't have the encouragement for them to read in the materials for them to read.
Okay. So Braille is almost like learning a second language, though, isn't it? In order to read?
So it's a code.
Okay.
It's really much. It is the same as reading. I think that what people need to understand that while we're reading with our fingers, the same part of our brain is functioning as someone who's reading with their eyes. The visual cortex is
Okay.
working in the brain. So it's really neurologically transmitting the information from the fingers to the visual cortex, just like when you read, it's transmitting information from your eyes to the visual cortex of the brain. So the same amount of hours that a sighted child would be reading in school, so that as they start to learn the alphabet, start to put words together, is the same amount of hours that a blind child should be using, except they're using Braille and with their fingers versus their eyes.
Okay. See, because, that's why I'm really glad you're here, because my perception was that when someone was reading Braille, it was just the individual letters. So you were spelling everything as you were reading. And like sighted kids like learn sight words and they can recognize chunks of letters all at the same time.
So in Braille, there's two grades of Braille. Grade 1 is a symbol, or as we call it, a Braille cell, represents a letter.
Yeah, those are the 6 dots, right?
6 dots,
Okay.
yep. And based on the way that they're arranged, creates the alphabet or parts of words, and those are contractions. So you have a symbol for ER or ION. So you don't have that different of an experience from a sighted reader, in that if you become pretty proficient, I think, I don't want to say that you start to guess, but you start to, as I've understood from sighted folks, that visually they start to fill in what's going to come next. So I think a real proficient Braille reader starts to do the same as they're reading along as well.
Okay.
But it does take up more room because Braille takes up more space. So it's about 70% more space, I believe, that Braille takes up than print does.
Okay.
So there's a lot more symbols that you have to account for when sighted people are filling in words, as you said, sort of visually memorize or recognize what word's coming next.
Yeah.
You can only do that in some chunks in Braille, but you do some of the same thing.
Now, you actually brought a Braille book.
I do. So this is a book, Learning to Read. And let me see if I can open it to a good page. So it's a print Braille book.
Yeah.
And it's something we created back in the 80s, National Braille Press did. So the idea is for parents who are sighted or to be able to read with their blind children. I think a lot of people have great memories of being able to read with their child. So we wanted to make sure that blind children could have those experiences with their sighted parents, or conversely, blind parents could have that experience with sighted children. One of the things that we have is called the Children's Braille Book Club, and it's a Book of the Month club.
Oh, cool.
And one of the great things about my work is that I get to meet people who benefit from Braille. And one of the things that I've gotten to learn is we have people who are grandparents now, who when they were parents, these books weren't available for them to read with their kids. But now they've joined our book club to read to their grandkids, and how special experience that is for them. And in other cases, I've gotten to speak with a lot of blind seniors and adults, people in their 60s or 70s, who are getting the books for children because they didn't have children's books when they were young. And in some ways, reliving that childhood experience of some of these classic
some of them are
children's
so
books.
classic. You have to go read them. And sometimes, I just held on to some of my kids' children's books because it's something that I read or I had when I was a child. So how do you get these books? You as in the consumer as well as you as in your organization.
So at our organization, we're a producer and a publisher of Braille. We produce the second most Braille materials in the country, about 9 million pages of Braille last year.
Wow.
And the way that we select books we want blind children to really be on the same level as their sighted peers.
Okay.
So we look at what books are in the mainstream and popular.
Okay.
And we want kids to talk about the same books with their friends.
Okay. So kind of like the whole Harry Potter thing of a few years ago. I don't know if it's still as popular.
Yep, it is.
Okay.
And so our publishing department does a really great job of really keeping an eye on what's out there. And what we basically do is if we can, we ask the publisher to provide us an electronic file of the book. And then we run a transcription process. That's what it's called. It's a software that will turn the printed word into the Braille code. And our transcribers will manipulate the formatting, the text for that into Braille. And also we'll look for mistakes that the software may have picked up. And maybe make some changes if the software was too smart.
Okay.
Then once it's done transcription, we send it to our proofreading department, and those are all blind individuals who are proficient in their Braille reading, and they're akin to copy editing. They're looking for any mistakes with the Braille code or symbols, or there's a mistake in maybe the way that the punctuation showed up in the particular sentence.
Okay.
Then we run a first draft through our big press machines. We have these Heidelberg presses that were 60 years old at this point.
Wow.
And they were converted from ink to become Braille presses. And we have paper specially made for us. The stock has got to be sturdier. Because the dots have to be firm and the resolution has to be really good for blind people to make sure that their book doesn't get crushed in the mail. The dots don't get crushed in the mail.
Okay.
And so then once we run a sort of a rough draft of it, our proofreading department then takes another look at it, again looks for any errors. And then once they give the okay, we send it down to our production team for mass production.
Okay.
We use zinc plates. Or what we call Braillos, which are embossers. Think of it more like printers. They have these big reams of paper coming out of the embossers, and those are smaller jobs. And then we have a collating and bindery department who then start to assemble the books.
And all of this is in Boston?
This is all in Boston.
Wow.
We just turned 93 years old, coming up on 94. We're on St. Stephen Street in the Fenway, around Northeastern and Symphony Hall.
Cool.
And we've been in that building since 1947.
Wow.
And as far as the way that families or blind children or adults get our material is we have we'll call it an online bookstore.
Okay.
But a lot of our patrons do their book orders over the phone.
Okay.
But we do have I guess before we thought of it as virtual, we had a virtual bookstore online.
Sweet.
And people can call in, place their order. We also publish our own material.
Okay.
And those tend to be technology or self-help materials related. So how does a blind person use the iPhone? How does a blind person use Google?
Okay, you're going to have to answer those questions. But can I interrupt for a couple minutes? Because, I'm listening to this process. And, the book that you showed us that's right here is like a sighted book that has like those additional thin plastic see-through pages that have the Braille on it. So it's both. So are all of the books that you produce those hybrid books that are both for sighted as well as Braille books, or do you ever have some that are just strictly Braille text?
Great question. So all of our children's books are those print Braille formats, like
Okay.
the ones you see. Some are board books, and instead of plastic sheets, they're more like labels or stickers.
Yeah, I
with-
got some from the library not too long ago for my Cub Scouts.
Yep. So those are the way we do some of the books for younger kids, the board books.
Now, do you still produce those, or do you just purchase them from the board book warehouse and add the Braille?
Correct. We still do them. We probably do a handful a year.
Okay.
And we do buy them, from the different publishers, and then create the Braille labels or stickers to then affix them. We don't want to interfere with the book, so sometimes the choices that are made are based on, can we put the Braille into it without really damaging the integrity of the book.
Oh, okay.
And the labels will be in different places on the page,
Okay.
so it doesn't disrupt any images or the print text.
Okay.
The books that tend to be, and we refer to them as soft cover Braille,
Okay.
those are the self-help and technology books.
Oh,
So
okay.
those are primarily all Braille. There have been a handful that we will do both as an option for print, because a lot of teachers of the blind or teachers who are working with people who just lost their vision and developing independent living skills use our materials for their teaching guides.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But the bulk of those books are Braille only for the
Okay.
blind community. We also do electronic Braille format.
Okay, which we'll talk about in a second, but I have one more question about the printing process. The paper that's used, you mentioned, was like almost cardstock. So does it also have to, again, I cannot read Braille, but is there ever the danger or the opportunity for the Braille itself to wear down from too many readings?
Yeah, and it definitely happens. The soft cover Braille books are more likely the ones that's going to happen with.
Okay.
The plastic sheets have pretty long shelf life.
Okay.
The board books as well. So it's the soft cover Braille books that tend to, after a period of time, potentially wear down. And those are the technology materials. But one of the things that we pride ourselves in, and I'd say most blind people tell us this, is that we have the best quality Braille. And I think that the components to having the best quality Braille in the country, or maybe internationally, I'll say, is the resolution of the dots, and that, again, the paper quality is such that it isn't going to break down as easily as others.
Okay.
And then also that we replicate what's in print. So if there's an error in the Braille, it's because the print has that same error. We're not allowed to change the
Oh,
text.
man.
But
That must really annoy your proofreaders sometimes.
right. But our transcription department and our proofreading department are second to none. And that's the other reason why our quality of Braille is top notch.
And they're probably also really good at Jeopardy for all the stuff that they have to read.
Probably. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about technology, because that totally blew me away when I first emailed you, and you instantaneously emailed me back. How do you read emails? I mean, they're on a computer or a smartphone, and you can't exactly make a smartphone turn Braille.
Well, you actually can with Bluetooth.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah. So I don't have that equipment, but
Okay.
what I use basically at my desk is there's a program that's I'd say sort of the leading text-to-speech software out there. It's called JAWS, a great acronym, Job Access with Speech. And basically it will read speak what's on my screen, but instead of using the mouse, I'll use PC control keys to respond. So if I want to do a response to an email, I'll hit Control R for reply. Or to create a new email, I'll do Control N. And then I'll type my response, and then instead of hitting the mouse to the send menu, I'll do Control Enter. So those are sort of the functions of
Okay.
that software. Now with people who are more proficient in Braille than I am, they can get that information and they'll have a very wide, what we call Braille display, 70 cells across.
Oh, wow.
And they'll be able to have the information on that display and read it with their hands. And then they'll have either a standard keyboard maybe above it to type back,
Okay.
or they might have a Braille keyboard to type back via Braille. Now, I have an iPhone here,
Okay.
and one of the beauties of the iPhone and some of the, let's see if I can get the volume up in a second, but one of the great things about the iPhone 10 years ago is that, and I was suspect, how can a blind person use a touchscreen?
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way that's possible.
You know, all the apps. It's like
Right.
I can't find the apps, and I am sighted. So
How
does that
the speech software that the iPhone has is called VoiceOver.
Music loading, mail, 1800, phone,
So you can hear as I
Messages.
scroll through, I have messages,
settings, one new item,
settings, Uber. Those are some of my apps.
clock, iTunes Store, edit mode,
iTunes
App Store.
Store,
CNA, messages, home, loading, fantasy,
fantasy. I love fantasy football, so I have a fantasy app. So the beauty of it is that every iPhone, anyone
Okay.
who has an iPhone who's watching, you can go to your settings feature and pull up accessibility, and you too can have VoiceOver on your phone. I don't have to buy a third-party software to get my phone to talk
Oh,
like I had to
sweet.
do 12 years ago.
Okay.
But also it has a component where you can, for those who still have some functional vision but it's diminishing, you can have magnification. But you can also Bluetooth your Braille keyboard or Braille display and have whatever's transmitting on your phone on a smaller display. I said for the computer, you have a 70 cell Braille display.
Yeah.
Well, now there's a 14 to 20 cell wireless Bluetooth Braille display where you can get the information
Wow.
electronically, or the phone can itself turn into a Braille keyboard and
Yeah, that just blows my
just
mind.
where your fingers are, because you've got 6 dots, you can
8:28 p.m.
create the Braille code and type back.
Oh, wow. Okay. That is really cool.
So technology's been really great from that. The challenges is that it's very expensive. Now, again, the beauty of the iPhone
iPhones themselves are like super expensive.
right, but it's universal design, so I don't have to buy another piece of technology to work with it.
Okay.
But the Bluetooth displays and it's sort of these note takers is another way of getting information, which is much like a laptop, but it has, instead of a screen, it has the Braille display, and electronically the Braille code pops up. Those are also expensive, and we've done some work in that area as well to try to get the price down.
Okay. So, like, are you actually partnering with like Apple or?
Well, we created our own product.
Okay.
It's called B2G, and then we do we have a family foundation called the Gibney Family Foundation. They're spread out across the country, but their interest was in supporting the blind community, and they help us. We have an award called Touch a Genius, and
Cool.
we give a prize to an organization or individuals who are looking to advance Braille literacy, whether it's technologically or or some other type of design. And so we worked with a company called Intervision, and they did something called the Braille Me, and that's much like a Kindle, except it's
Oh.
Braille output.
Wow.
And then, if I may, I have a ruler here.
Yeah, I was looking at
It's called
that.
a caliper. So it measures, you can see that the Braille is changing as I move it, but it
Oh.
measures to the 16th of an inch.
Wow.
Most Braille rulers are just, 12 inches.
Yeah.
And so this was a Touch of Genius Prize winner. There were 2 mechanical engineers from MIT that applied.
Of course, I might too.
and came up with this concept. And it's only $15.
Wow.
And for students to be able to more fully participate in their class, whether it's math or science, and measure to the
Yeah.
16th of an inch was a big game changer. One of the quotes that I remember hearing from a teacher of blind students, they said, "Finally, my kids can participate in science
Wow.
in a full way." So
That just must like make you so happy when you hear stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, part of my work is obviously advocating for why people should donate. But another benefit of my work is I have to hear from people who benefit directly.
Yeah.
And I get to hear these amazing stories.
And then you just retell those stories, and people just pull out their checkbooks or Venmo or whatever they do now. I don't
Yeah,
know.
we've done pretty well, but we could always use more support for
Okay.
sure.
Now back to publishing. When I was looking at your website, it said that you produce original Braille works written by blind authors. How do you find the blind authors?
So I think one thing that we also have a lot of pride in is that we have a pretty good pulse to what the community needs and what the blind
Okay.
community needs are. And so we go to a lot of conferences and conventions of
Okay.
educators for the blind or of the blind. And through those and talking to people, and people submit us ideas and suggestions.
Like all genres, or are you
Well,
looking
most
for?
of it, again, is around the technology
Oh, okay.
or self-help.
Oh, okay.
So those are the primary things that are, as I like to say, they're written by the blind for the blind.
Okay.
So when you are a blind person and you want to know how to teach your blind child how to cook, we did a book called Stir It Up. And
wow.
it had recipes that would be fun for kids, but also how to teach those kids how to cut vegetables safely, how to not only
I think I need that for my kids.
not only how to follow the recipes, but the technique that you would want to show them.
Okay.
If a blind person wants to learn how to take pictures with their iPhone when they're on vacation, because hey, everybody's posting pictures on social media, why shouldn't a blind person of their vacation? Then no better person than a blind person to teach another blind person and say, hey, this is how I do it. These are the apps that work.
Okay.
One of the books that we did was called Get the Picture.
Okay.
And that book was a book that discussed 26 apps that a blind person can use to use the camera function on their iPhone.
Wow.
Whether it's being at the grocery store and trying to determine what box of cereal you have, and it reads the barcode on it, and then it tells you in 30 seconds it's Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, or whether it's how to take a picture and have it centered and then be able to post it on your Facebook page. Those are some of the books that we do. And again,
How
they're
do
blind.
you do all that stuff?
Well, I think one of the things that people should understand is that while we are blind, we have the same interests as everyone else does. Technology does help make those things possible.
Okay.
And I think a lot of it also is just the want to and the encouragement of being able to use these technologies. Again, I didn't think an iPhone was possible, so it took me about 2 years to join the party. But the more I met other blind people using it,
Joe, you gotta get this.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
really awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about, finding the barcode on a box of cereal. I mean, I've gone to the checkout at Market Basket and the cashier can't find the barcode on a product. And I'm thinking, if you're visually impaired, how do you find the barcode to take the picture
So there's
to have it read?
yeah,
to
and
you?
I'm sorry I should have brought a product, but maybe next time.
Okay.
But there's
Sequel!
this app that Microsoft developed. It's called Seeing AI, so
Okay.
artificial intelligence. I do have that app on my phone, and it I don't know if they how they scanned every possible barcode or not, but it lights up, and like as an example, I'll use Nantucket nectars.
Okay.
So my wife likes grape. I like watermelon strawberry, but
Ooh.
the bottle feels the same.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to get one for myself, I'll rotate the bottle and it gives me a tone. And the closer it is to the barcode, the tone gets louder.
Oh.
And then I'll stop it there and then it will say doo-doo-doot, Nantucket nectar, watermelon strawberry. So that's some of the great work that some of these companies have done.
Oh, okay.
It's a free app. There's another one called Tap See. Same kind of thing. It will
Cool.
tell you, hey, it's a 40-year-old person. or or mail. One of the stories I like to tell, and I don't know if my wife Gina, who's watching, thinks this is funny or not, but I like to share it. She loves
You'll
Pepsi.
find out when you get home.
She loves Pepsi and I love Coke. Somehow we still are together. And we were having dinner one night a few years ago, and she said, "Hey, this bottle doesn't feel like a Pepsi bottle." And we are pretty tactile as blind people, so we get to know the shapes of bottles and help us discern what we have in hands of this.
And then the manufacturer goes and changes
right,
it.
Right. And so she says, "I don't think this is Pepsi. Can you take a taste of this?" And I take a taste. I said, "Well, that's definitely Pepsi. It's definitely not Coke." She said, "No, I don't think it's Pepsi." And I said, "Well, let's see what Tap Tap See tells us."
Okay.
And I take out the phone and scan the bottle with Tap Tap See, and it says, in 10 seconds, Pepsi bottle. So that helped determine that I was right for once.
I won. For once, I love that.
But those are apps that have really been helpful. You can identify money similarly with a currency reader that I have as well. Sometimes if you're trying to scan your mail, nothing's perfect. When you're trying to scan your mail, pretend I have a piece of mail here, and my hand might move a little bit, and then it doesn't capture it as well. So, but for the most part, I'm able to. Unlike when I first got my first cell phone in 2001, I can now see who my missed calls were. I can enter contacts myself.
Cool.
I can text message. I can email. I can manage my fantasy team on it. I can do everything that everyone else is doing on their phone.
That is wild. Yeah, because I remember, going back 30, 40-ish years, I remember hearing that, technology didn't exist back then, but how some blind people always wanted singles in American currency because it all felt and felt the same. It was all the same size, and they had to fold it differently in their wallets. And you go to Switzerland and they have Braille on their currency, and each denomination had a different size, so it was a lot easier for blind people to figure out how much money they had based on the size and the Braille on the bills. But now you have an app that can do that?
Yep, it's on the iPhone, and the Department of Treasury has been working on, it's probably been about 8 years now, on possibly changing the bills so that it won't be Braille, but it'll be a tactile component to the bill where you're able to discern what the denomination of it is. But as anything, there's bureaucracy, politics involved, so things don't happen as fast, and maybe,
Switzerland's been doing it for years.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't pick on. Okay, but speaking of, currency, also on your website it talked about tactile graphics when it came to Braille writing. Is that pie charts and stuff, or is that any pictures, or?
It's both. So and I thought I had brought a tactile graphic of the map of the 48 lower states, and I'm sorry I did not.
Well, we'll just
bring
have to have a sequel, but continue. Okay.
But tactile graphic is a two-dimensional rendering of an image or a pie chart. In school is predominantly used for science and math class.
Okay.
But it also, one of our materials for young children is you have those books where it's the alphabet A through Z, and there's maybe a picture associated with the letter A. So an A might be an apple, a B might be a ball. So those things, we have sort of two-dimensional renderings of those images as well.
Okay.
Postcards. I have a card, and it's in Braille. It says a rainbow over a duck pond. But then I can feel the card and feel the rainbow, feel the raindrops, and then feel the duck. So I can understand that image better by having tactile graphics. It's an art form. It is very labor intensive for us. We have a tactilist who creates the mold for the tactiles.
Wow.
So it's pretty intense work. We do about 150,000 tactile graphics, again, mostly for high school well, elementary, high school, and college students.
150,000.
Tactile
Okay. I
graphics
thought
a
you were
year.
just going to say like 150.
No.
Wow.
But it really is a great way, and back to that map that I didn't bring. It really gave me a sense of the shapes of the different states and
Okay.
how each state relates to one another. So as an example, I always thought that Mississippi and Louisiana were to the east of Alabama.
Okay.
And when I had that tactile map of the United States, I then realized, oh, okay, I had it backwards. They're to the west of Alabama.
Right. Okay.
And now I understand why they refer to parts of Florida as the Panhandle, because now I can really feel the shape of the state.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then it gave me a better understanding of, the areas of Idaho and Utah, places I've never been, and sort of how they relate to each other. So it's been a fun thing for me to explore the U.S. that way, and other, we've had people are traveling to parts of Europe or Italy, and we have tactile maps of different parts of the world, different states who say, I'm traveling to Israel. I'd love to get a tactile map of Israel so I know where I'm going and understand the geography better. So
wow.
tactile graphics are pretty important.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Now, again, your website is very complex. Well, not complex. It's very user friendly, but there's a lot of stuff on there. And another part of it talked about math and science transcription. Is that like kind of like formulaic stuff, or?
Well, it needs a different type of formatting for one to be able to have a student be able to take in an equation.
All right, I'm thinking, calculus must be horrific.
Fortunately, I never took calculus.
Yeah, neither did I.
But the other part of it as well is that Braille for math has its own code. It's same cells,
Okay.
but the symbols and the way they're arranged mean something totally different than, say, print.
Okay.
Replicating print. So it went from what was known as Nemeth to now is United English Braille Math. And so, as an example, the letter A is .1 in the Braille cell, but the number 1 is also a .1, but it has a symbol in front of it to say this is a number, not a letter.
Oh, okay.
So,
because I'm thinking, out of those 6 dots, there's a finite combination, so you'd eventually run out of options. So you have like okay.
So you have a
Extra little
symbol in
symbol.
front of it, yep, to represent the numbers. But then I never used Nemeth Braille, but it's its own code, just like
Okay.
there's its own code for being able to read or write music as
Yeah, I
well.
want to find out more about that too.
But again, it's the same cells. It's just using they have their own meaning or different symbols that represent, say the math equation, maybe what's in a parentheses or out of parentheses versus a parentheses in the text of a sentence.
Okay. Now, is that I'm trying to visualize this. Is that symbol saying this is a math formula? Is that symbol before each of those cells?
I think it would be at sort of the beginning of the equation, but then
Okay.
also the cell would represent something totally different. So
Okay.
in some case, like what would be a letter D would mean something else.
Okay.
Knowing that you're in a math.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
kind of what I was thinking. So it's like you were about to go into a formula, and then.
So when
Okay.
you see on our website that we do that work, it's letting know teachers that are visually impaired or
Okay.
test companies that we do this work. We are able to put these math into Braille. We're able to do music into Braille, so that if there's a need from a student out there, we're the place for you to go to, because we're able to do that well, and we do that, and we do it well.
So, okay. Sorry for my ignorance. I apologize for my ignorance.
Oh, no,
but
no ignorance.
With music, if you have tactile music written out and you're trying to play an instrument, how do you do both? Because if you're like trying to play clarinet, you need both of your hands to play the clarinet. So how do you read the music at the same time?
So I think the people that I've spoken with who are musicians and are read music Braille.
Okay.
A lot of it is what they'll do in advance of playing the instrument. So they'll prepare and get to memorize the music.
Okay. Right.
Or what they've also told me is that they may have learned initially to play their instrument or play songs by ear, but there's a nuance that they missed by not being able to read the music Braille. So when they read the music Braille, they pick up on some things that they could do better once they go play it.
Okay.
And then it's in a lot of cases it's more helpful for them in writing music or composing for others, that they're going to say, hey, I just composed this song I want us to play. That's when they're really using the music Braille. But you're right, it is hard to play an instrument and, on the other hand, use the music Braille. So I think it's sort of more supplemental from the people that I've gotten to speak with. But
because I'm also thinking your memories have to be phenomenal, because some music pieces are pretty complex.
Yeah, we've had we've had Braille readers who go to the conservatory in Boston. We had at our virtual gala, we had a young lady compose a song. She basically did a parody of a song. She wrote new lyrics for it, but she also got four other musicians to perform with her.
Wow.
And she had to tell them, this is what you're going to be doing. This is the key that we're going to be on, and so forth.
Okay. Wow. So I'm just reviewing my questions. So did we talk a lot about e-Braille solutions, or is that something that we
I touched on it a little bit.
Okay.
So,
can we elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So again, e-Braille is one of the challenges with Braille is that it takes up a lot of space, and it's costly. The paper is, again, especially made for us. The labor, the transcription, the proofreading, the machinery, new and old technology. So it's pretty costly.
Okay.
And you only have so much room for these boxes of Braille. Like you mentioned Harry Potter earlier.
I know.
It's like 3 feet high. One book of Harry Potter is like 3 feet high in Braille because it's 12 volumes of it, because it takes up more room. So with electronic Braille, again, think of it as a Kindle or as a laptop computer, where it has a Braille keyboard versus a QWERTY keyboard.
Okay.
But instead of a screen, it has a Braille display, and that Braille display will, with different technologies, will create the Braille code, and it will pop up like pins popping up. And you'll be able to read, and then when you're done with that one line, you hit the refresh button, and it'll go down to the next line of text, and it will pop up, and you're reading across.
Oh man, that sounds
so that's electronic Braille.
Cool.
So the beauty of it is now you could have 2,000 books.
Wow.
On your note taker.
And they wouldn't take up each 3 feet of space
Correct.
in your living room.
Correct. And then for us as the producer of Braille, it's just going through transcription and proofreading.
Okay.
We don't have to run it through our Heidelberg press. We don't have to collate it. So people are able to get books more faster, efficiently, or if they wanted to get the leading software in Braille transcription is called Duxbury Braille Translator.
Okay.
And they can, most of these note takers come with that software built in. So they could go and, say, pull a book off of what's called Bookshare, or any or any other type of medium that has where you can download electronic files of books.
Okay.
And hit their software as well, and it's referred to as sort of Jiffy Braille, because it just does it like that, and then they can.
But is it accurate?
It's pretty good.
Okay.
It's pretty good. It doesn't have that proofreading component.
Okay,
but
I'm just thinking anything with Jiffy in front of it,
Yeah. And then it becomes a question of, you know, how important is the quality versus, you know, having more access.
Okay.
But it's up to the individual to decide. But it's better to have those choices to make
Okay.
than not to have them at all.
Wow. Okay. Now with the e-braille, the readers, can you just get any file like from a library and run it through this extra program to appear in Braille?
If it's open source, they should be able to do
Okay.
that.
Now,
Yep.
do you partner with like libraries and have your information available, either the print books or the e-books?
Yeah, we try to more so with the hard copy Braille. We try to,
Okay.
when we can, partner with a library or send a local library copy or two for, in case there are blind children or families with blind children come to the library, that there's something for those kids to have.
Okay.
Brookline Schools, I know, had last year bought a number of books because they had a young visually impaired student who was in 3rd or 4th grade, and when the class would go to the library once a week, there's nothing for that child to do.
Poor kid.
And so they said, hey, let's get, they can read Braille, let's get some books for them to choose from.
Yeah.
So we try to advocate for that kind of access and try to make people aware of our work.
Okay.
And with our most recent fundraiser, we're going to try to give 10 libraries across the country a subscription to our Children's Braille Book Club. So they'll get a book from us once a month.
Cool. Okay, well, speaking of fundraisers, what kind of fundraisers do you do?
So we just had a virtual gala. It's called A Million Laughs for Literacy. We've been
Okay.
doing it for 15 years. It's usually an in-person event. We've had it at Fenway Park a couple years ago, the Museum of
Wow.
Science last year. It's a 300 to 400 person event, but due to the
Yeah.
pandemic, we weren't able to have our event at the State Room this year at 60
Darn.
State Street.
Okay.
So we had to pivot in June and say, well, we're going to do a virtual event. It's the biggest fundraiser for us annually. It's also the best way we can showcase our mission and get
Okay.
people interested in what we do. So we have always a component is a comedy performance. So it's called A Million Laughs for Literacy.
Fun.
And, it has the reception, some food, wine, drink, live auction, what we call Fund a Book, where it's an opportunity for people to donate, even though they're not bidding on a trip, let's say,
Okay.
but they want to be able to help us fund particular projects or books. And
Okay.
then we might have a presentation or an awards presentation or maybe a panel. And then we have a comedy performance. It's a 30-minute comedy performance. We've had, going back to the early days of this event, from Jay Leno to Dana Carvey, Paul
Wow.
Reiser, to this year was Jim Gaffigan was
Okay.
our virtual comedian. So it was very different because
It's virtual.
it's virtual, but we exceeded our goal by about $70,000.
Wow.
The biggest question that I had, well, there were two questions that I had as someone who's responsible for the fundraising for this event, is how are we going to get people to tune in? It's a
Yeah.
Thursday night. They might be zoomed out already, or they had to use it for work.
I think everybody's zoomed out.
It's one thing for them to register, but how are we going to get them to actually remember, hey, it's happening on a watch?
Okay.
So hopefully, Jim Gaffigan was a draw, and some of the musical performances we put together would hope was a draw. I think one of the things I had said to my team is, as much as we can talk about Braille for an hour and think it's really compelling, we got to make it 2/3 entertainment and work the mission in that way.
Okay.
So we had 3 musical performances by really exceptional Braille reading performers with
cool.
fantastic music that they produced.
Oh, was
put
it
together.
original stuff or was that cover stuff?
Covers.
Just curious.
Covers,
Okay.
yep. And then the other thing was so what we did as well is we sent out to our sponsors and their virtual guests
Okay.
meals from Legal Seafoods to
Ooh.
choose from. And one of our co-chairs, Tom Sullivan, who founded Lumber Liquidators, now he runs a company called Cabinets to Go, and
Okay.
Gracious Homes, and he owns a few vineyards in France now. And so he donated a bottle of wine for each of our sponsors' guests or someone who bought a ticket at $350.
Oh, excellent.
And so they got a dinner for two shipped to them from Legal Seafoods and a bottle of wine. So my thought was, well, if they get this in the mail the day before the event with a thank you from us in it, they're going to tune in tomorrow and say, I'm going to have this dinner.
Yeah.
And our sponsors are going to tell their guests, hey, don't forget to tune in. How's that wine tasting?
Yeah.
And so the second part is, how are we going to be able to raise money virtually? We usually raise at the in-person event $120,000 to $130,000 through the live auction,
Wow.
the fund a book. So how's that going to translate to a virtual component?
Right.
And so one of the decisions we made is, instead of having a quote professional MC or a TV personality,
Okay.
we thought one of our board members is blind and she's a mother of sighted children and she's got a lot of charisma. I think she'll translate better to be our MC than a quote professional, because she lives this every day.
Cool.
And she's out in California and she did a phenomenal job. And the second part of it was, how do we get people to be interactive? Because bidding or raising your card at Fund a Book can be a contagious thing when you're in the crowd.
There. Oh yeah.
And competitive.
Exactly.
So how do we do that in a virtual way that people are interactive? And we were, there are companies out there who are trying to sell us software for virtual donations and this, that, and they're pretty expensive. But my event manager saw an event where that software crashed because she was doing a lot of research.
Oh no.
And they said, well, they just did it on the chat via Zoom.
Oh.
And people enjoyed it. And I said, let's do it that way then.
Yeah.
And so we did it in the chat, and people started to post $2,000. This is a great trip. I'm going to bid on this. And it really was interactive.
Don't you dare outbid me.
And it was really interactive.
Oh, I love it.
In the chat. So I was hoping we would do at least $50,000. Virtually, we did $110,000 in 90 minutes.
Wow.
And
you blew that goal out of the water.
Yeah, absolutely. So the program was compelling, but also the chat component really was interactive. And at one point, we had 290 people in the Zoom room.
Wow.
And after the headliner was gone, Jim Gaffigan, we still had over 200 people logged in and participating. So that's our biggest fundraiser. We're going to look to maybe do a virtual wine tasting in the new year. We also been a part of the John Hancock nonprofit Boston Marathon program.
Oh, okay.
So we get a couple numbers each year for people to run on our behalf and raise money for Braille literacy. So just found out today that the 2021 marathon's being postponed.
I heard that. It's still in 2021.
Right. It will probably be in the fall, hopefully.
Hopefully.
So that might affect our fundraising. So we're going to look to do, again, virtual is becoming the recurring theme here.
It's the new normal.
But I think we have people run on our behalf. We also do something called the Blindfold Challenge, which is a way for a sighted person to put on a blindfold and run with a sighted guide, so a family member or a friend who they trust, and get them from point A to point B and raise money on our behalf.
Who they trust.
No, it's definitely, trust is really important. And we don't want anyone to ever think that they're going to know what it is to be blind because they're going to run blindfolded for 30 minutes. But what we try to convey is that just like that guide is facilitating that experience for the person who's blindfolded, we're facilitating education and reading for blind children. And that's what, with the right support, anything can be accomplished if people band together and support the work. And that's what we want to convey. So we're going to be doing I don't know if it's going to be in person or not, but we're going to be doing a road race in May.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking for people to run a 5K blindfolded. We will require a training.
That would be
people.
good.
We'll train them on how to be guided and how to be a guide.
Okay.
We also, in the past, we've done what we call tasting with a twist at Hampshire House above Cheers.
Ooh, okay.
So we've had our annual birthday celebration, which happens to be on St. Patrick's Day. And we'll do a mini course, 5-course meal,
Wow.
a couple hors d'oeuvres, a soup, mini entree and a dessert. And again, we will have people blindfolded,
Okay.
and we want them to use their other senses to discern what they're eating.
Wow.
Many people have told us,
That sounds fun.
I predetermined what I was going to think about this drink or this soup or this meal because I saw it.
Oh,
But instead of
okay.
knowing what's on the menu, we want you to taste it and guess what you think you taste in that soup. What do you think that hors d'oeuvre is? And then we'll have a Braille reader kind of walk them through the tasting, but also describe to them in the chef's words, this is what you actually had.
Oh, wow.
And people will like,
Okay.
see, I knew it. I told you that was this. Or, oh, I was totally off. I thought there was cream in that, but I was really wrong. And people have a lot of fun. So we really like interactive
Excellent.
activities with
Well,
our fundraisers.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we are out of time. But no, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with me and the audience how much you are doing for your target population. That is phenomenal.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
All right. So I want to thank everyone at home for tuning in this evening. I hope you are as enlightened and as encouraged as I am after tonight's conversation, and hope you reach out to National Braille Press and maybe check out their wine tastings. So anyway, have a wonderful evening. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you around town. Good night.